I was diagnosed in June of 2018. Um, I had experienced some pain in my right thigh and thought I had just pulled a muscle. And looking back, I had other symptoms that I just thought it was part of getting older, and I really didn't pay attention. Um, but the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, and then they said, "You have ovarian cancer." And I'm like, "What? What?" I couldn't, it was very hard to come to terms with that because that was the last thing on my mind. I thought I had a pulled muscle. It was determined that I would go through chemotherapy, 6 rounds. Um, it was, the cancer was too large to be to have surgery at the time. And I got through that. I went through a year of Avastin. Um, and then they tried, but still they thought the tumor was not operable. Um, After the Avastin, they tried Lymparza, but I had some reactions to that. And when um, I was taken off of that, the tumor decided to grow again. So I had another, and during COVID, I had another 6 rounds. And taking a second look, they determined that I could have surgery. I had that surgery in April of 2019. And when I recently saw my doctor, he's like, you are definitely in remission, and I'll see you in 6 months, which was really great. So that's my journey.
My journey is really different. Um, in fall of 2019, my husband and I were on a trip through Colorado and New Mexico. We were very active, doing a lot of hiking and walking and outdoor activities. And from the first week when we were in Colorado, I was out with a friend of mine who lived there, and I bought a dress in Red Rocks. By the time I got to the second week in Albuquerque, the dress was too tight. And I thought, well, this is weird. So I called my friend who was in Denver, and she said, you Midwesterners, you tend to bloat when you're in the mountains. She said it's not unusual. She said when you get home, give it about a week, because she was originally from the Chicago area. She's like, give it a week, and you should be back to normal. I got home, and I was not back to normal. Within a couple of weeks, the bloating was still there. I lost my appetite completely. 3 bites, I was done.
Wow.
And I was exhausted. I would come home from work. I worked in downtown Chicago. I'd come home from work at 6 o'clock, and I'd be in bed by 7:30. So the 3 bite eating, my husband said, that's it. No, this is not you. You enjoy your food. You enjoy eating. Something's wrong with you. So we started with my GP, who said, there's blood in your urine. I'm going to send you to a urologist. I think there's something wrong with your bladder. And she sent me to a urologist locally, who did a catheter, did an exam, and he said, I'm going to tell you, it's not your bladder. There's nothing wrong with that. He said, I'm suspecting it's a gynecological tumor. He said, we're going to set you up for a CAT scan tomorrow morning and see what transpires. He goes, this is my gut feeling. I'm not telling you it's going to be benign or malignant. None of that. I can't. I had the CAT scan in the morning, and my doctor was supposed to call me the next day. She called me at 11:30. She said, grab your husband and come in and see me. So I knew. I knew right away it was cancer. So it was about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I had a wonderful gyne oncology team from the University of Chicago, and they did the surgery. I was stage 1C.
Wow.
And I know how grateful I am for that diagnosis. I know how grateful I am for my body saying, hold the phone, something's wrong here. And, the reason I'm here is because I want to spread the news that in some cases, it can be found early if you have the symptoms. And I was lucky enough to have those symptoms. That was that all transpired in end of 2019. I finished chemo in February of 2020, and this year I hit my third year of survivorship. So that's my story.
I kind of have a sad story. Um, After my diagnosis, because I was so weak, I was, they put me in a nursing facility for a while to do physical therapy. I wasn't able to walk and to get my strength back. And my husband would come every day to see me. Um, so I didn't really notice, because I was kind of concentrating on my own, that he seemed to be tired a lot. And after I got home, about a week later, he said, I'm really not feeling well. And we went to a clinic, and they discovered that he had lung cancer.
Mm.
Um, Ironically, at one point, we were both having chemo at the same time with the same medication. So I was like, you just copying off of me. You can't stand that I'm only, that I'm doing something you're not. So we joked about that a little bit. But unfortunately, he passed away about 10 months after his diagnosis.
Mm.
So I've had to face a lot of this by myself. I'm kind of glad in one way that um, he didn't have to be around when I went through my um, recurrence, and that he wasn't here through COVID because he wouldn't been able to handle the masks. But that really impacted me in a lot of ways. But I have, on the other hand, I've grown a lot closer to a sister. She's had to step in and be my healthcare advocate, if you will, because Rick wasn't around anymore. So that's been kind of a positive, that she stepped into a role that I'm sure, as I'm the oldest of five children, and I'm sure she didn't expect at this stage to be, having to worry about my care. But it's been a positive thing there. So that's kind of where I can think.
Uh, I remember when I got the diagnosis, and it probably changed me more than anybody else because I couldn't believe I had cancer. It didn't run in the family. I didn't think I had any lifestyle that would put me more at risk for it. We never had children, but I had been on birth control for years, so I wasn't having a cycle, which they said, contributes more. It was just kind of this shock. I remember getting the diagnosis, and then, of course, I was waddling around like I was 7 months pregnant, so I started working from home, and I remember just taking a bed for like 2 weeks before my surgery. And I just didn't think about it. Felt like I couldn't think about it. My husband was fabulous. He was, you're fine. They caught it early. Like, you don't know. I haven't had the surgery yet. We don't know what lies ahead. And my friends were wonderful. But it was just really surreal. It came out of nowhere. And I was lucky. I had a good support system at home to get me through a really odd time.
I found in NOCC, um, when I had my recurrence and during COVID, because I was stuck at home. The people who had gone with me to my chemotherapies the first time, nobody could go with me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I, I would go to my chemo, I would come home, and I was by myself. And I started reading a lot of social media things, and someone posted um, something about NOCC and that they were having these Zoom meetings. And I'm like, wow, there's other people. I didn't even know anybody from Indianapolis who had ovarian cancer. I didn't know anybody. So I um, sent an email and got involved with the monthly meetings that were being happening over Zoom. And um, ladies were very supportive and actually helped me make a decision about switching oncologists, um, and which was the right thing to do. But I just, I thought maybe I was just overreacting. And, after describing the problems I had been having with my oncologist, I was very, I felt supported in making that decision. So, and since then I've really enjoyed that, and that it's very important to me.
I'm the opposite. I'm from the Chicago area, so we have two places called the Cancer Support Centers. We have one in Mokina, Illinois, and one in Holman, Illinois. So my chemo ended and COVID hit. So I wasn't going to work anymore. I was working from home. And I went to the Cancer Support Center, not necessarily to bond with people. It's just I wanted to be around people who were going through what I was going through, even if it was just the staff, because most of the staff were cancer survivors.
Huh.
One really fun thing, I have a golden retriever who's a therapy dog. He's retired now. But I would take him to the cancer center with me. And just the joy that he would bring other people on the journey was amazing. He would go to yoga classes with us. He would do all this great stuff. Fast forward to seriously 6 weeks ago. I was laid off from my job. I worked for a non-for-profit. And I said, now I have time. I want to tell people my story. How do I get involved? And I found NOCC online. I spoke with Karen and I said, look, I have time. I want to be involved. I want to tell my story. Not one more woman. I want to be part of that. So that's how I found them. Interestingly enough, I knew nothing about them when I was going through cancer, and I was at a really well-known cancer hospital. So I'm going to have a little talk with my doctors next time I see them and bring them some information. But I'm happy to be involved, and I'm looking forward to doing health fairs and other things to be able to tell my story and share with other women and men.
They really do need to seek out a support organization in their area. I think that would have helped me a lot during my initial um, diagnosis, because I could have asked questions of people, and I didn't know of any organization at that time. And I think I would have learned, things would have been a little different. I would have paid more attention to what was going on, perhaps. Um, and that would be my suggestion.
Oh, trying to think back when you're first diagnosed. Um, Number one, the first gynecologist they sent me to was dreadful. I hadn't gone to a gynecologist in years. I was in menopause. My doctor did everything for me. Um, Switch doctors. If you don't like your care, it is totally your right to switch doctors.
And I really should have done that myself. I was assigned this person,
Yeah.
and I thought I didn't have any choice.
Right. And I think a lot of women feel
Yeah.
that way.
And when I do remember talking to my husband about that, I don't like him. Well, Sharry, you don't like doctors anyway, and that's what he said to me. But things could have been different if I had spoken up sooner.
Yeah. Well, I had the one gynecologist who seriously had me thinking I need to go home and make out my my last wishes. It's how I felt at that point, and how things turned out, kind of odd. So I called one of my doctors and I said, look, I need another referral. And they sent me to the University of Chicago Gynecological Oncology Department. And the woman who ran the department did my exam, looked at me, and she goes, I need a hug because everything is going to be okay. I can just tell by the internal, I think we're fine. She said, I'm not going to know, obviously, until we get on the operating table. But if you don't like that doctor, switch that doctor. And my other piece of this is what I tell every woman that I meet that's diagnosed and has to go through chemo: 64 ounces of water a day. I'm not kidding. I remember them telling me that during chemo. It's magical. And yes, seek out a support group, because your husband, your kids, your friends, you know, they're all great, but
They don't
know. They don't know.
Yeah.
They have no idea. And I remember one of the worst parts, because my surgery was done, we were moving into the chemo portion of the treatment. And one of the worst parts of me was when my hair started falling out. And I thought, I have just spent the last 5 years of my life growing my hair out, and now it's all falling out. And it was just this, I don't think it was the hair falling out, because the hair comes back, right? It just was, oh my God, I'm a cancer patient.
It was a visible sign.
It was a visible, like I would meet women, I would be out somewhere and somebody would have on a head wrap, and I'd be like, and I actually talked to a couple of women, they're like, oh, I have ovarian cancer. What do you have? We need a head wrap with a button on it. I mean, it was just,
Yeah.
It's and share your story.
I agree. The other piece of advice, try to find a gynecological oncologist in your area, because I did not have that until it was time for surgery.
Yes.
I was not treated by someone who was well versed in what I had. He was treating the symptoms and not the person.
Right.
And the gynecological oncologist that I now see it's just night and day. He knows what's going on. So that's a piece of advice I would love.
Great piece of advice. Definitely.